You're listening to Game and Chat, where we level up with conversations about gaming then and now. I'm your host, Daniel, aka One to Switcheroo. So let's press start and game on. Welcome everyone to another episode of Game and Chat, streamed directly to your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, or all of the above to support the cause. And with that being said, welcome everyone back to episode 13. We are already here, is the lucky number for some. We are on Halloween week as we record this, so I guess it's very appropriate for this being the next episode. And today is a special one, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm actually not alone today. Today we have a very special guest, our very first special guest of Game and Chat, and it could have been none other than the very, very amazingly talented music composer of the podcast, and aka my very own husband, SoundsBySébas. But today we're calling Sebastian. Hi, Sebastian.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? How's your day going?
Good.
Sebastian is the responsible for all the amazing soundtracks that you hear in the background, guys. He is being the reason that I started the podcast in the first place. So, of course, it had to be him to invite him over and chat a little bit of what is one of his favorite games and franchises from his childhood. I think it will be a great insight on what we're going to touch base on today. And it's none other than the blue blur himself, Sonic the Hedgehog. Sebastian, how do you feel about Sonic? Just overall thoughts.
I love Sonic. He is probably my, I would say, second favorite gaming character, right behind Mario. Close tie for first, but I think Mario comes in first. But a lot of my childhood memories are with Sonic the Hedgehog, and I still love him to this day. So.
That's awesome. I mean, for me, Sonic, it's always been like up to par like with Mario. I didn't grow up with Sonic itself, but it's always been around in some sort of way, and I really appreciate, because it's like we have Mario if you want someone like a casual, very like paced adventure, and then Sonic, it just takes a little bit more like, you know, the fastest. I mean, yeah, that's very redundant, but it's like a different, it's something different. I think it's more like action based, you know, every element, like the vibrant colors, the attitude, the background, the music, which is mainly the reason that you're here to discuss with me, because of course you can't talk about Sonic the Hedgehog without talking about the soundtrack, because that's one of, if not one of the main things that makes Sonic games very special. So today we're going to share a couple of things about Sonic the Hedgehog, our little experiences with the Hedgehog, his friends, his adventures, the transitions between 2D and 3D. And I know you are more leaning towards the 2D.
100% 2D.
I'm more leaning to the 3D. Yeah. So I think this is like the right time for us to take a conversation and, you know, check a lot of the strengths of both. I mean, some of like the things that we prefer one on top of the other, and see how the franchise as a whole has evolved, and like everything that just came to be up until this day. And funny enough, I mean, we talk about what we're playing every week before we get things started. And we're both here. Mm-hmm. We're both playing Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. How do you feel about the game so far?
I love it. I love the fact that it has the 2D elements to it. And I am pleasantly surprised at how much I love Shadow. He's not a character I'm super familiar with, because, like I said, I primarily play the 2D games. So, yeah, I think that the game is amazing. I can feel the evolution of Sonic, just like with the gameplay mechanics and everything, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I'm loving it so far. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, especially coming from Frontiers. We both really enjoyed Frontiers and like the direction they was going. Of course, there were things that could have done a little better, and I feel like with Shadow, specifically Shadow Generations, because let's be real. I mean, Sonic Generations is basically just a port of the previous game, which is still great game. A lot of people consider this like the best 3D/2D Sonic game up to date. But the fact that they took Shadow Generations and basically took all the things good things from Frontiers and like tighten a little bit the controls and like the adventure that seems short, but is beyond that what I was expecting. And I'm actually kind of glad that this was your very introduction to Shadow, and because like I said, you weren't familiar with the character. However, this really brought it to the light, and you know, we were actually right before starting this podcast, we were looking at Shadow, man. We need to get some Shadow stuff because it's just that cool. But yeah, we're gonna talk about a lot of things, of course, guys. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody who has listened to the podcast so far. We're about to break 150 downloads, so thank you very much for everybody who has listened to the previous episodes. Especially, seems like Zelda is the popular topic, so I'm really glad that the last episode with Echoes of Wisdom actually is doing really good, and last week with Super Mario Bros. Wonder celebrating its first anniversary, which we both truly enjoy, and it's a game that is whole very special, just as Mario Odyssey was. But anyway, it's all thanks to you people. Keep listening to the podcast, keep sharing, keep spreading the love, and I really appreciate every single one of you. But without further ado, we're going to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog and celebrate this icon of gaming. I would say maybe even as big or very close to Mario. So welcome everyone again to episode 13 of Game and Chat, Sonic Through the Ages. And of course, as every podcast, we need to start reminiscing about how is our first experiences with all these games. In the case of Sonic, we're going to start with our guest. So, Sebastian, what's your story? How do you came up with Sonic? Like, what was your first game? And basically, what drew you into this character in the first place?
Yeah, so my first experience with Sonic the Hedgehog was when I was probably about 7 years old. I played Sonic 2 on the Sega Genesis. I remember I had a friend named Jimmy that lived up the road from me. And
that's very specific.
he invited me over to play after school, and he had a Sega Genesis. And up until that point, I had only ever played Nintendo. I had a Nintendo NES and a Super Nintendo. And mainly I just played Mario. Super Mario World was and still is my favorite game of all time.
Of course it is.
Up until that point, that's all I had ever played though. And I remember being completely entranced by the bright colors, the thumping music, and the speed of the gameplay. I was just instantly drawn to it. It was something completely different than I had seen before. And me and my friend, we would literally sit up in his attic bedroom and just play for hours and hours and hours. Yeah, I just remember being so drawn in whenever I saw Sonic. I think he was a very interesting character. It was because of Sonic 2 that I even got a Sega Genesis. Up until that point, like I said, I only had Nintendo consoles. So because of that game, I begged and cried till I got a Sega Genesis. And then after that, I got the first game too. And I remember that I played the second one first because when I got the first game, I didn't understand why Tails wasn't there.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was like, what the hell is this? But yeah, I was so bummed about that. But yeah, I had played the first two games, and basically Sonic 1 and 2, and then the year after Mortal Kombat kept me busy until Sonic and Knuckles came out. I think that was like 94. And I think the other thing that got me into Sonic was just the advertisements, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more later, but they were very attention-grabbing and eye-catching and just very direct, and it was very intriguing to see them.
I would say it was even very a little too direct sometimes.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of my style.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. Like straight up to the point. My case, I think, looking back into it, I mean, I never owned a Sega. I've always been a Nintendo guy, and I think it was one of my neighbors. His name was Ibrahim. He live across from me, and I remember he would come to my place to play my Nintendo 64, and then I would go to his place after school to play Sega. At the moment, we play like Mortal Kombat, also Mortal Kombat 3, which I remember vividly, and like how I should not have been playing that game.
Yeah.
But then he got Sonic, and I didn't know Sonic until like way after playing Super Mario 64, I believe.
Oh wow.
And how then, as you said, it's like the whole thing, because I mean, before Super Mario 64, I used to play on my cousin's house, like Mario 3 and Super Mario Brothers 1. So it was very like used to that kind of style. And then I see Sonic. I honestly don't remember. I think it was Sonic 1 because I don't remember Tails when I played it. So I'm gonna say he had Sonic 1. And like you said, it's just like the vibrant colors and like how this game like alone looked like a million years better than Super Mario 1, Super Mario 3. And I would say it's like up there with like Super Mario World, just because I mean, we're actually looking at the footage right now of Sonic 2 as we record the podcast, and everything looks so brighter. The faces, the character sprites actually look really, really good. Kind of reminiscent to, Super Nintendo, like Donkey Kong Country, and like how that was actually a leap in terms of graphics when it comes down from, from 8-bit to 16 bits. But back into what Sonic itself, I mean, I just remember being super cool, but I was super frustrated because I couldn't control the thing. So I was, it was kind of like a mixed bag, but all I knew is that I couldn't stop playing it. I just remember playing the same levels over and over again because there was at some point that I couldn't just like beat it. I remember beating this game when I was a kid, and even up until this day, I mean, we're just playing it on Sonic Origins and we're stuck on the final level. And but like I said, nonetheless, it's how, just the sheer attitude of the character, and how you mentioned briefly about like how the advertising, which, I mean, for where I come from, I didn't get the advertising per se, but when I was exposed to it, I was like, oh wow, like these guys were like really like going for the neck to Nintendo, and rightfully so. This actually provoked like Nintendo to like up their game, like with their games, because Sega Genesis was a little bit ahead of its time too, in terms of like games and graphics and gameplay and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't think I was more exposed to Sonic, 2D Sonic per se. My biggest exposure was with 3D Sonic, and I do remember, which is kind of like rekindle like my likeness for the character. I remember going to this friend's birthday party. Then he had a Dreamcast, and Sonic Adventure was there. I thought Sonic was just like a one and done thing. I didn't know it was gonna be like a big franchise. And then I saw this game, I was like, oh my god. And then later Sonic Adventure 2 came out, which in my case is my favorite Sonic game. And that's what game that introduced Shadow in the first place. And how I was blown away how this game came to be. And it came first on the Dreamcast, but I actually saw it on the GameCube. That's where I played it for the first time, and I was just like wow, like it's so cool to see this on 3D. And you know me, I'm a Nintendo 64 kid. I was on 3D like from the start, so of course it was gonna appeal more to me because I feel like I had a little bit more freedom and a little bit more I had more control, like the speed and like how like the pacing. It was still fast, but I can still control it somehow. I feel like for me sometimes the 2D games get lost a little bit on like the pacing, and that's what kind of like draw me back a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think for me though, the difference is when I saw the 3D games, both Sonic and Mario, it felt like a downgrade to me because the visuals weren't as crisp and bright, and I think they lost a lot of finesse, and I feel like it was just so jarring for me. But yeah, I know you're a 3D guy.
Yes, of course, I'm a 3D guy, but right now I want to give you the center stage we're going to talk about, because of course there's no 3D Sonic before 2D Sonic. I think the fact that 2D Sonic was such a success to the point like people being a straight up competitor against Mario really made a difference. So that's going to be our next topic, and how 2D Sonic is basically like the golden age of the character, and like how this is like still relevant up until this day. I mean, we got releases like Sonic Mania, where we touch base in a little bit, that were released very recently and how extremely good and successful they were. But I just want to hear a little bit on your opinion, Sebastian. You being a big 2D Sonic fan, like from early years, like, what do you think this is like? This is like such a timeless franchise, and it's so beloved by fans, especially us that go back from those days.
Yeah, I think for me, the Sonic games are so iconic because they were such a phenomenon at the time, how different they were from everything else, specifically Mario. And I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think Sonic is probably the only character in that kind of genre that at some point maybe surpassed Mario for a little bit. Maybe not so much now. With the movies, though, he's coming back, but I think at one point in the 90s, like, he was bigger than Mario, dare I say. And I think that for the game specifically, the gameplay mechanics were so different, and they weren't trying to be Mario, which every other game was trying to be Mario. And I feel like that's really what made it really stand apart. It had Sonic had so much attitude and swagger and personality. Like, whenever you stop playing, he starts tapping his toes and looking around. And
that's true.
Yeah, like that was something that was really interesting to see. It's very 90s. It's just like the quintessential 90s vibe. And the finger waving in the beginning of the game, his expressions, the music and the levels, it was so unique and so different for the time. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the advertising was very aggressive and directed at Nintendo, and people ate that up. In the 90s, I saw the ads in real time.
Yeah.
As a kid, and hip hop culture was huge. In most of hip hop at that time, that's what hip hop was. It was basically saying that you were better than your competition or your peers, and I think they really played into that. So I think that was one of the things that really made it stand completely different from itself. But I think that the level design was also completely unique, and it worked well to complement the speed mechanic, which was something that they innovated. It was something Sonic was, became known for, but it was his thing that started out that way. So I think that, they say the average gamer right now is 35 years old. And that's like the average age for a gamer. And if you do the math...
right there.
Huh?
I'm right there right now.
Yeah. And if you do the math, a lot of that generation grew up with Sonic. So I think that that's what made it such a classic, is that, like, the average gamer right now grew up playing Sonic the Hedgehog. And it's nostalgic for them. I think that, you see a lot of things right now that play to the nostalgia in marketing. Like, you think of like Funko Pops and things like that. That all plays to nostalgia. And I think that being what it was back then and it's still being relevant today, it just makes it a classic.
Yeah, I mean, you brought a really good point when it comes down to how, you can say, with like how this game was ahead of its time, and you're actually you're actually right. I don't remember a 2D game like from the 90s that would be like as fast-paced as Sonic, but more so, even looking at the footage, it's how are able to like keep up with Sonic speed. And when you see like right now, even in today's like 3D games, I mean, Sonic Frontiers on the Switch, how sometimes they cannot keep up with the speed, and then you see all the pop-in and stuff, and how they managed to figure this out. Of course, it was different technologies for different consoles, so limitations, etc. But like for back in the day, like having this game to process and like generate images this fast as the guy keeps running, it's just like great. And it's just, I completely agree on everything what you said. Basically, like, this is just you can always go back to a Sonic game, whether it's 2D or 3D, like each generation. I think the 2D games, of course, gonna age better because of, the art style and all of that. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, like Sonic Adventure 2 doesn't look very good nowadays, but I still love that game. However, I feel like, we can always go back and we'll see them. They know this too. I feel like the resurgence of Sonic right now, like they're doing like insane amount of merch. Like the movies were successful, and I think that I would even dare to say that the movie really made an impact too. I feel like Sonic was going for a little bit of a crisis before the movie came out, because the last couple of games went really well. I mean, we got Sonic Forces, which was poorly received, and I mean, the game speaks by itself. And then, another attempts of like remakes, but they turn out to be very glitchy, and then they try to find their pacing again with Sonic Frontiers, and now the Sonic Generation seems like they're pretty much back on track. But the fact that we keep seeing how big of a presence, and especially the fandom, like the Sonic fandom is, it's huge, borderline crazy, but it's nice to see because you don't get this much love and appreciation for a character, even in its lowest moments. They're always been there, and now Sonic is pretty much everywhere. I think we've been getting like a Sonic game every year, pretty much, right?
Yeah, and we're talking about the golden age of Sonic and everything. And one thing I remember with Sonic as a kid, whenever it was like live actually happening, is he had TV shows and comics and merchandise, and like when you were in school, when you got your new clothes for the new school year, you either got Mario, Sonic, or like Mickey Mouse. Like how everyone wears like the Avengers stuff now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was Sonic, which it still is. I see a lot of that now, but if you had Sonic stuff on back in the day, like you were the shit. You were cool.
Yeah, it was everywhere. I mean, in my country, it was more so like, I would say, I was more so Mario. I think Mario had a little bit more presence than Sonic. However, I did knew Sonic, and he became more and more relevant throughout the years. I mean, I would say maybe in my country, what you were as a kid was like a Power Ranger. If you were the red Power Ranger, you sucked, basically. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, all the influences, and like we talk about like the gameplay and like how it was so like different. They weren't trying to be Mario, as you said, and how they really stand out against the competition. And I mean, if I go back, going back to like when I played these games, like I said, I'm more familiar with Sonic 1. I do play Sonic 2 with was it Sonic 2 with Tails or Knuckles? Tails, and then 3 was Knuckles. And then I remember playing, I think the Knuckles one was the one that I most recently played back in the day. The other ones like CD and stuff, of course, I didn't have access to the Sega that came up with the CD, so I wasn't very familiar with that one. I actually played that for the first time when we got the Sonic Origins collection. But it's just, consistency, and I think that's what this game has done very well, like over the years. Like, I mean, maybe not so consistent on the control sometimes, but I feel like the 2D games really have nailed that nostalgia factor, that it doesn't matter if it's 1985 or 2030, you will always can go back and enjoy a Sonic game as it is.
Yeah, and I think, like, me very well with the games. I'm not a huge fan of like the older games sometimes, like they're unplayable to me, but not Sonic. I feel like you can jump right back into those games. It's kind of like an old Mario game. Like you can jump into Mario 1, Mario 2, but Mario 3, Super Mario World, like you can play those games with no problem. They're still very, very playable and enjoyable. And the other thing too is the Sonic games introduce so many core elements that are still in their games, like the ramps. Watching him go through the loops and everything for the first time, I was completely mind blown.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yes, I feel like that also made it part of the golden age of gaming, was like just how different, and again, we keep saying this, but how unique it was. It introduced new things that, again, were unique to this franchise and are still mainstays to this day.
Yeah, funny enough, I didn't remember the loops until I saw them on the 3D games for the first time, and then I went back to an old Sonic again. I said, oh, he actually does the loops in the 2D games too. So, but yeah, no, it's just awesome. I feel like they really knocked it out of the park, and like Sega found its footing and found its mascot that could really compete. And like right now, I think what the most successful Sonic has been is like on the merchandise and like the fandom and the presence, and I don't think that's gonna go anywhere. I think it's only gonna get more and more in Sonic going forward. To think that at some point this actually Sonic was like, in kind of sort of like a crisis, like Mega Man right now, for example, that hasn't gotten any games in like years, since like Mega Man 11.
Yeah.
And that was like okay game. I mean, didn't finish it, but I don't know.
I think I liked it more than you.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely like it more than me. But I don't know. There's something that threw me off, and I'm more of it's like the same thing. I'm more of a Mega Man X. Mm-hmm. I think more of a classic Mega Man kind of sense there. But yeah, I mean, it's just Sonic. I think is timeless, and I think it's just gonna remain that until for a very long time. And now we got the leap into 3D, which is, again, this is where most of my Sonic knowledge comes from, and I will get into there. But since you being a 2D Sonic fan, and like I know you had a really hard time with transitioning to 3D games. Mm-hmm. So as someone that maybe had like a different opinion in regards to like the transition through 3D for Sonic, like what do you think, like just in general, that transition can be a little bit divisive amongst like Sonic fans?
Yeah, so I definitely had a lot of issues transitioning from 2D to 3D games in general, Sonic specifically, but Sonic and Mario. In fact, I've told you before.
Oh boy,
here we go. The whole transition to 3D, it honestly made me kind of fall out of love with gaming for quite a few years. I know one of your favorite games, if not your favorite game, is Mario 64. That game, and people are probably not going to like this, but...
Cover your ears, people. Skip.
It frustrated me so much that I stopped playing. I never had a 64. Like, I played it somewhere. I played a Mario 64, and I was like, nope, not for me. So, yeah, I didn't transition very well. And for Sonic specifically, I feel like Sonic's gameplay is very reliant on high speed, and it works really well in 2D, where the paths are clear and we have more control over his movements. And in 3D, I think trying to maintain that same level of speed, it led to, I don't know, like disorienting camera angles and clunky controls and like a lack of spatial awareness. I think it still does sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there's no deny that. I mean, that's a very valid point. Like, all joking aside, like, I mean, other than like the transition to the 3D space, which for me is like, it's like great, like super cool and all. I mean, as much as I enjoy Sonic Adventure 2, I do remember having a really hard time in some of the levels because of that same issues,
Yeah.
Sometimes the thing would go so fast and the camera will like position itself like out of place, and it's happening like nowadays. And I mean, I love 3D as much as I love the 3D games. It's like I had to admit that the majority of issues and like clunkiness and glitchiness are coming from like the 3D games from Sonic, and I think that's no secret for anybody to admit.
Yeah, the levels in 3D, like they have to be a lot larger, and it makes it difficult to maintain like a smooth flowing experience that we all loved in the 2D games. It's like the levels feel slower paced, and it doesn't feel like classic Sonic. Like the 3D era of Sonic, it was a lot of experimentation, but the results weren't always good.
Yeah.
I think Sonic Team introduced a lot of various gameplay styles and characters with unique mechanics. Like the fishing with Big the Cat in Sonic Adventure, or using guns with Shadow and Shadow the Hedgehog. They made the games feel a little inconsistent to me, and I think it took away from like the speed-based platforming, and that's what was really defined. That was what Sonic was.
I feel like they went through like a phase of like you said before, like experimentation when it come down to 3D until they found their pacing. I mean, we got a lot of like crazy games. Like I remember there was this game. You probably don't know about this, or maybe you do. There was this game that came on the Wii called Sonic and the Secret Rings. Mm-hmm. That it was designed exclusively for the Wii because you can only control Sonic by tilting the Wii remote. So I was really excited, but then the experience, I don't know, it was like he feels fast but he feels slow at the same time, and then you tilt it, and then like 3 seconds later he's when he start veering to one direction or the other. So it's just I don't know, there's a lot of inconsistency, and I know they really tried finding their footing. And I feel like when Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 came out, I mean, they sort of did in terms of the formula. For me, I mean, you also know this, and I'm sure you guys know this about me up to this point here, you long 10 listeners of the podcast, is that I'm a very story-driven gamer. And, you know, I feel like the elements of story that were brought onto 3D really, like, honestly, they dragged me to it. Sonic Adventure 2, the introduction of Shadow, and like all these like new characters that give a little bit more context to the game and the lore, like really, I mean, let's be honest, this is what really like caught me in the first place, and made me like a little bit overlook like the issues that the games might have. Something that the 2D games don't have, like, in particular, you know, I mean, they're 2D games after all, but at the same time, Sonic the Hedgehog, I mean, how much of a deep story do you need? It's just right now, of course, because that's what, you know, gaming like has like become, like you need to have like a story-driven game like most of the time, but at the same time, like you can just have a game that is just like level after level after level, and I find the appealing of that because you don't want to spend 30 minutes caught on a cutscene. I mean, I know you you're one of those guys. You will just press A, skip, just get into the gameplay
as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. But then sometimes again, we don't know what to do because we don't look at the cutscene. So that's why it's important.
I don't know. I feel like nobody's playing a Sonic game for the story. I feel like, especially back in the day, like I'm still speaking about the 2D games. Like, no one was picking up Sonic to have a story. They were picking up Sonic to have fun playing a platforming game. And I think that's what threw a lot of people off. I think by the time it was time to transition to 3D Sonic, there was already such a huge and passionate and fanatical fan base that had very high expectations for what a Sonic game was supposed to be. And I think when it transitioned to 3D, it kind of like split the fan base.
Pretty much.
I was on one side and other people were on the other side. And I don't know, I found it very, very jarring, like I said before. And Sonic's 2D gameplay, it set such a high standard for so many people. And I think that it was at its best in the early games, like the simplicity, the precision, and the satisfaction of like racing through the levels. It wasn't... I feel like maybe in the new Shadow game they got it down, but it's been very hard to replicate that in like the 3D sense, especially like the precision. I think with 2D Sonic games, like you're not randomly falling off cliffs and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't happen that way.
It's just that for me, I don't know what, I mean, we've seen it, like even recently playing Sonic Mania, like I was just a wreck at some point. Yeah. I don't know, there's something about like the 2D games, like for me it's like the opposite. I feel like I'm having a really hard time, and it's a linear game, and it's like a start to finish like 2D Sonic game. But I don't know, there's something about, and sometimes I try to get a little bit ahead of myself and I want to get things done quickly, so I make a lot of mistakes. But I don't know, I feel like on the 3D, like whether it's glitchy or not, I feel like because I'm on a 3D space, I can kind of see like where I'm going. And like you said, which is actually my prompt question, what do you think, like now that we like play like Shadow Generations right now, what do you think like they got right this time in terms of like what really like made it click for you so far, like with Shadow, or like things that the game didn't have before that now they have, might make it a little bit more, might turn you around, let's say,
from a 3D perspective?
Yeah.
The one and only thing that they needed to fix was how they learned how to control their character. That was it. Like, that's the only reason I haven't clicked with 3D Sonic games, is because I felt like he was completely out of control. Like, I would hit a button and he would do something different, or I would push a direction, he would not go that way, or I would jump and he would fall off a cliff, or he would just... And I also felt like the games were too automated. Like, you hold up and he just goes and like everything just kind of happens for you and you're like, oh, that looks cool, but I'm not doing anything. I feel like with this game, he controls Shadow. He controls super, super well. I think they took a lot of feedback from Frontiers and applied it to this game. And I, honestly speaking, with the exception of the main character being Shadow, the Shadow game is what I wanted Frontiers to be with Sonic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, in terms of like, the environments, the levels are still very Sonic. They're not like some abandoned forest with no characters or no life or anything happening in it, like Frontiers was. The concept was okay, but I wanted Frontiers to be what the Shadow game is, where it's really tight controls and amazing graphics, and still has a hint of like nostalgia to it, like the level design and things like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, honestly, after playing Shadow, and I think I'm about to finish it for what it seems like, I would even if they decide, you know, there's a lot of like discussion like why people will be like remastering games that came out like 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If they decided to like fix the controls and re-release Frontiers with these mechanics, I think it would be actually like really good. They're probably developing Frontiers too. There's talks about that. But honestly, like just release and rework the controls a little bit. Just release another update, and I feel like it could really, really bring the franchise like to the next level. I think they got it right with Shadow, and you know, I didn't realize until I played a certain levels, and then I started playing my file, and I went through the first level, and because I was already used to the control and his abilities, I went back and I actually like cleared that level, and I got an S rank on my first try on my file. And this actually controls like really well, and it takes me back to how Sonic 2 like control, because overall, like, yeah, right now it might feel clunkiness, but back in the day, actually that game controlled really, really good.
Yeah.
And especially like on those like levels, like the space arc, the ones like the one in the space, the first level, the one from the original game, it was a longer level, but you had this like freedom of which you can do in this game with like skip parts and shortcuts and stuff. And the fact that they're able to bring that back is because now we have tighter controls, and we can actually like aim and like see where we're going.
Yeah.
Which it was the other like Sonic games like lacked before. Even Frontiers, like up until this day, and don't get me wrong, we love Frontiers.
Yeah.
I think the boss battles in Frontiers are some of the best, if not the best boss battle we had in any Sonic game, at least from recency bias or whatever. But the game, I mean, we just started ourselves. We put it on the Switch, and we were like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, we played it on the PlayStation, but we also have it on the Switch. And when we started it up and we're looking at it, like what did the pop in?
The popping is like
there's like a blade of grass right in front of him, and it pops in like it's really bad. And I think the other thing I'll say too with the 3D Sonic and like where it stands right now is like. It's kind of like Mario Odyssey. I feel like Mario Odyssey, not that Mario's ever had a lot of control issues, except for Sunshine.
He never had control issues.
Yeah,
except for Sunshine.
Yeah, in 64.
No.
No, but you know, like I feel like Mario Odyssey is like the formula. Well, in my opinion, it should be the formula going forward. Like that's how Mario games should be. I know people liked the Bowser's Fury thing, which it was cool too, but I just think that the Odyssey formula was amazing. I think that this new Shadow game should be the formula going forward.
Yeah, if they really listen to the feedback and like how everyone is like literally like how they're gushing about how well Shadow controls and how well like the game is and the level design, I feel like yes, like I feel like this is their Mario. I think Sonic Frontiers tried to be the Mario Odyssey moment, or like what people call right now the Breath of the Wild moment.
Yeah.
For Sonic, I think Shadow Generations is that moment right now.
Yeah.
Because everything seems to be like working like fine, and even if it's a short game, like you said, I think that's gonna be like the standard what they are aimed to like go forward. And you know, who knows? I mean, we might see a new 3D Sonic game. They've been releasing one every year so far, so
yeah,
we'll see what 2025 brings us. And you know, with like the new generation right now, and the PlayStation Pro, and the potential new console from Nintendo coming up very soon, we'll see what happens. All right, I think we got to the best part. I think, like I said, one of the main reasons you're here, which is you can't talk about Sonic, whether it's 2D or 3D, without talking about the music. And again, there's like a division between the 2D music and the 3D music that we're going to talk about. But, you know, to start off, I mean, again, Sebastian actually is the face behind SoundsBySébas, which is the music composer of Game and Chat. Actually, the music that you're hearing right now is a rendition to good old school Sonic the Hedgehog 2D music, which I feel like I did an amazing job, and I hope you guys really enjoying so far. I mean, hopefully we'll make plans to see if we're able to release this for you guys to listen to, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I mean, of course, you've been into music your whole life. That's your life, that's your bread and butter. How do you think that gaming music, especially like Sonic music, like affected your your music career, your likes and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when it comes to gaming music, so for those who aren't familiar with me, I perform R&B, like pop music. I'm a singer-songwriter, but a couple years ago I delved into the world of video game production music, and it's something that I've always kind of wanted to do. I would always make songs, like instrumental music, and be like, this is sick, but I would never sing over top of this. Like, I don't know what to do with it. And then I learned about sync music and production music, and I was trying to make EDM music, and it was through playing it for you I realized that everything I did sounded like a video game. And I think a lot of that has to do with, growing up. I would say the two video game franchises that really inspired me or drew me in were obviously Mario and Sonic. The gameplay and everything, but also the music. I think both have amazing soundtracks. I think Sonic is a bit edgier and different from Mario soundtracks. So the music from Sonic, it had a very profound impact on me. I've been playing music and playing instruments and writing music since I was about the same age as I discovered video games. I grew up listening to a lot of different types of music, like Motown and oldies and R&B, 90s pop music, gangster rap, like things I should not have been listening to when I was 5 and 6 and 7 years old. But I listened to a lot of mature music for my age, and my favorites growing up were Janet and Michael Jackson. The thing I liked about their music is, the hard-hitting beats, the high production quality, the funky vibes, and the unique sounding chord progressions. Like, obviously I didn't realize when I was 7 years old that that's what I liked about the music.
Yeah.
But looking back, that's what it was. And I feel like as a video game franchise, Sonic, the soundtracks of the Sonic games nailed all of those characteristics as well. It's just way different than other video game music at that time. And I think to this day, the Sonic franchise has like the best video game music ever. I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Definitely.
The 2D and 3D are very different, but in particular, I love the chemical plant themes from all the games, the casino themes. The Metallic Madness is one of my favorite.
That's Sonic Mania, right?
Yeah. Well, it's in different games, but yeah, the one from Sonic Mania is my favorite.
It is the different games?
Yeah. But the one from Sonic Mania is my favorite.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I would say Sonic Mania as a whole is like a perfect Sonic game.
Yeah, that's my favorite Sonic soundtrack as a whole. Like, if you look at the whole body of work, that's my favorite. But one of the ones I grew up with was the Sonic 3 soundtrack. And I don't know if you know this or not, which you may, but it's very widely believed, not confirmed officially by Sega,
I don't know what to say.
that Michael Jackson contributed to the soundtrack. And I tend to believe that he did. There are a lot of games, there are a lot of songs in that soundtrack that straight up sound like Michael Jackson. And it wasn't just him, it was him, and like, he wasn't a musician per se. He kind of directed traffic, if you will. Like, he's like, I have this idea, and then people would go and execute it for him.
Got it.
So him and his team of producers and writers allegedly worked on the soundtrack, and some of the people on his team have said that that's very true, that they did work on the soundtrack. But there are a lot of similarities with like chord progressions and beats and melodies that align with Michael Jackson's style. And there's a song for the Carnival Night Zone. It sounds like, so my favorite album from Michael Jackson is Dangerous. And again, it's because of the high quality production and the beats and the funk and all that kind of stuff. And that song from Carnival Night Zone, it's literally off of that album. Like, it sounds just like it, except for like the obvious like carnival sounds, like the dun 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 dun. Yeah, that wasn't Michael Jackson, but the beatbox and like the dropouts and the transitions and all that, they sound just like Michael Jackson. Like literally, it sounds like his voice almost.
I need to re-listen to it because I think of Carnival song, but I don't quite recall some of the songs. But I need to pay attention next time. I will play it after we're done here. Just to like get an idea. But yeah, I mean, Sonic, it's Sonic, and it's also the music of Sonic. I mean, of course, just like World 1-1 from Super Mario 1 is so iconic. I think Green Hill Zone is also one of the most iconic like music and gaming like ever made. And you know, and even so, like when the transition from 3D happened, and again, this all goes back to like the story and like how there's more like a story and context and lore in Sonic. So now the song starts having lyrics and all that. So, you know, it might be not up to the taste of like many people, but for example, one of the highlights of my childhood in my case was when I beat Sonic Adventure 2 for the first time. Spoiler alert, I don't know. It's like Sonic and Shadow basically like team up, and they turn into Super Sonic and Super Shadow to defeat the final boss. And then you have this like kind of like rock and roll song called Live and Learn. I'm sure. So that's like one of like the highlight. That's like peak like Sonic soundtrack, and I know it's like for a fact it's like up there in like top 10 like best Sonic music of all time. At least in my humble opinion. I'm sure some of you will agree, some of you might disagree. Other than that, you know, sometimes I think that they take it a little bit too far, but for me that's just, it was really good, and it really fit the setting. And I think I kind of got that nostalgia back when we were playing Frontiers, and like how like the music, which again, I mean I did listen to this kind of music before. I know you're more like an R&B like chill guy, but actually the setting and like how like the music really fit the scene. I think Sonic, it's very good at like nailing like the music aspect and like how to set the tone, like whether it's a 2D or a 3D game. I feel like their soundtrack and their like musicalization is like almost like a 10 out of 10. And like the setting, like I don't think of any Sonic game that I remember playing that the music was necessarily bad. I feel like it really fit the setting like for what it was intended for.
I see what you mean. I don't necessarily agree though, to be honest with you. When we talk about my fallout from 3D, the music had a lot to do with it. I never really got into the 3D soundtracks because to me they abandoned the elements of the 2D soundtracks that I loved. It didn't feel like Sonic to me. I was like, what is this? Like I felt like I was like at an emo concert or something. Like it gave me that vibe, and you know, I don't listen to that kind of music, and it just didn't hit the same way for me. Like it didn't look like Sonic, it didn't sound like Sonic, so I was like, what is this basically? And I will say though that Sonic Frontiers, I know it has two kind of like three different kind of soundtracks in one, because it has like that more like Breath of the Wild kind of vibe for like the main world, and then the boss battle songs. Even though I would never like put them on my AirPod and just jam to them.
Then look at my YouTube.
But you know, like the cyberspace levels, they had amazing songs. And to be honest with you, I mean, you know this, but I had an album that I did for a library called Reverse Play, and it's actually called Supersonic. I wasn't trying to be coy about it, and it was literally inspired by Sonic Frontiers. And when I wrote the songs, it was a modern take, so elements from Frontiers on like the Sonic Mania soundtrack, which was, you know, harkens back to like Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. So my album Supersonic, it was really about how do I use modern instruments to do like the soulful kind of like funky vibes of the 90s, and that's kind of how the songs came together. But I would say Frontiers is probably the only 3D Sonic that I love the soundtrack. Some of the other ones, like they have some of like the classic elements to it, but that rock stuff it threw me. It really did throw me. But I do see what you mean when you say like I don't remember exactly what it is, but when he's like going down and skateboarding, like it makes sense for him to have that music. Like I get it. It's just, again, there's that nostalgia effect for me where, you know, when I it was very jarring when I first saw it, because I was like, okay, this doesn't look like a Sonic game.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't sound like a Sonic game. Like this could have just been another character and they could have not touched Sonic.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of like, it kind of like grew with the time. Of course, if you were right the exact age when you were playing Sonic, and then you successfully transitioned to the 3D and like the music, and you know how you grow up and like how your music taste like changes, and that's pretty much what is predominant, kind of like that. Like you said, like that rock and roll, like sort of like quote unquote emo, like rock music, which is pretty much Shadow. I mean, that's Shadow. That's this whole Shadow character here, all the edgy character per se. I'm sorry.
No, it is, but I like the music in Shadow. Like it doesn't sound the same to me as what we're talking about. I don't know. I feel like it goes more because it's a different character, because it goes with Shadow. Like it makes sense with him. Where when it goes to Sonic, it doesn't click with me.
That's true. Yeah. But back when I was saying, and it's just like I feel like they really nailed. I mean, in the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is like they really nailed like the musicality of the game. You know, whether it's like to our taste or not, I feel like you can say that, for example, there are certain Mario games that some like tracks might not like hit. And I say this like as a huge, I mean, the biggest Mario fan in the world. I feel like Sonic, rarely there's like a song that doesn't fit the occasion. Let's say.
Whether it's to my specific taste or not is another question, but I don't think there's ever been like a bad soundtrack or like a bad mix for Sonic.
Yeah,
I agree.
And for my favorite songs that I can remember, I mean, like I said, I mean, for me, if we're talking about 2D aspect, Sonic Mania is like not only the perfect 2D Sonic game, it's the perfect soundtrack. I feel like every song there is like really good. If I were to pick one, I mean, you mentioned Metallic Madness. That version I like the Flying Battery song version of that too. I think it's very catchy. And like the one of the last levels, which I don't remember, the one that you get like stuck in the ball and you go moving back and forward. So you guys know what I'm talking about. And then, I mean, for 3D, I mean, the Sonic 2, Sonic Adventure 2, like all that soundtrack, again, very nostalgic for me. But Frontiers from recent memory, both the boss battles and the cyberspace, I think, are my absolute favorites on 3D, like on 3D nowadays. And if anything, I know Superstars had really good soundtrack too. Like overall, it really fit.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I wouldn't say it was as memorable, but I think it was again, they really did a good job with the music.
To me, the Superstars soundtrack was like the equivalent of like the new Super Mario Bros. Like it fit the bill, but it was like almost like not cheesy, but like, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of...
I mean, if I'm going to be completely honest, if you ask me right now, oh yeah, this and I don't remember.
I couldn't name a single song.
I couldn't remember. We need to replay it again. Maybe we'll have an opinion, but...
Well, like Sonic Mania, I think it's Frontiers, I guess, as well, but Sonic Mania was the first video game soundtrack that I completely downloaded the whole thing. The composer, what's his name? T. Lopes, right?
Yeah, T. Lopes.
Every single song is phenomenal. Like I actually... not a big advocate of listening to like video game music while I'm like on the treadmill or like on the Peloton, like or working out or whatever. But like that soundtrack gets me going.
Yeah, that one, and like I said, Frontiers really gets the blood pumping. And it's a really good like mood lifting when you're struggling to wake up and try to work out in the morning. But yeah, I mean there's not much to say about Sonic music other than it's one of the highlights of gaming for me in general. I don't think any other company will do as better as they do, like overall. All right, so now we talk about, what Sonic meant for us in the past and why we think like the 2D and the 3D games can be both iconic and divisive at the same time. But now let's bring that all together and just talk about a little bit what the future of Sonic like looks like. Like, I mean, we've got the successful release of Sonic Cross Shadow Generation. That seems like it's the direction that the franchise should go. But like, if you were to see Sonic 5 years from now, where do you see the franchise going, both in like 2D, 3D, merchandise, movies, etc.?
Yeah, well, I know that one of the goals of Sega is they want Sonic to be as big as Mario, or bigger than Mario. They said that recently. So I know they're going to keep going with the movies. I don't know if the movies are meant to be just a trilogy, if they're going to keep going. Like, I know there's enough to keep going for forever if they want to. I'll speak from me personally. From a 2D perspective, I think Sonic Mania kind of set the bar really, really high on what to expect from 2D. Something I would think would be fun to see would be the first 3 games, well, Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and Sonic and Knuckles, seeing them remastered in the style like Superstars, where they kind of like modernize it. I think that would be very interesting to see.
That'd be awesome, yeah.
I would personally love that. And then in a 3D perspective, if they could do a Sonic game like Frontiers, but more so in the vein of the new Shadow game, to where controls are super tight and super crisp, but the levels are more true to Sonic like they are in the Shadow game, as opposed to like the open world thing they tried to do with Sonic Frontiers. I would love to see that. So those are kind of my hopes for the two, both 2D and 3D.
I mean, I agree on every sentiment, basically. For me, it's like, yeah, absolutely. I think it would be awesome if they can just remake the first Sonic game, if not the first 2 or 3 Sonic games on the Superstar style, and they really can nail that. And it would be nice to see that with a fresh coat of paint. And on the 3D, of course, I mean, oh, by the way, do you know Sonic Mania, actually, Sega published it, but it's actually developed by like a third-party team, which is crazy. Like,
yeah.
for so many people, what it is the best 2D Sonic game, it wasn't even made by Sega themselves.
I know.
So that is crazy to think about, first and foremost. By the way, fun fact for those who didn't know that, well, there you go. But yeah, but that in terms of like 2D, like 3D, is basically what you said. Honestly, at this point, I'm expecting something like Frontiers 2. Just, tight up the controls. Yeah, you already know what works. Just make it better, and like have Sonic really have like the moment, which I find it very ironic that like right now the best 3D Sonic game is a Shadow game, so it's not actually Sonic.
Yeah.
Which I guess Shadow fans get their win for the first time. So, and they can just like get out of the shadow what the Shadow the Hedgehog game was. But it's just, Sonic's gonna be around, and I think it's gonna be more predominant than ever. I think like Sega is not gonna let the momentum like fade away like that, and we're gonna see a lot of the Hedgehog from years to come. And honestly, if it's gonna be like this, I can't wait. I mean, I really enjoy like playing these games, and yes, they can be clunky and frustrating. I mean, like drop the controller sometimes when we play, but at the end of the day, we have fun. And for us in particular, like Mario and Sonic, it's basically, plus Zelda has been like a whole relationship. So
yeah.
I'm always very excited to see what's next, and I'm always looking forward to see it. I'm looking forward to seeing it with you.
Yeah, of course. Me too.
But anyway, people, that's gonna bring us to the end of the episode. Sebastian, thank you very much. How you feel?
I feel good. It was a lot less nerve-wracking than I thought it was gonna be. I know I'm not on camera right now, but I'm usually behind the scenes, like making music and things. So it was a very fun experience.
Yeah, I mean, Sebastian is also my consultant, so I always try to run the episodes by him like every so often to make sure you guys get the best quality possible. So again, thank you for everything you do, and of course, but before we go, let's do a little game here. Let me just pull my little cheat sheet real quick. Just real quick, maybe a couple rapid fire questions about Sonic. And even if you can't come up with the answer, try to come up with something like you
trivia?
just remember. Not trivia, more like a rapid fire.
Okay.
So we're gonna go and have a couple of questions here for you. So first thing that comes to your mind. First of all, favorite 2D Sonic game level. Sorry.
Favorite 2D Sonic level?
Yes.
Any of the chemical plants.
Okay. I'm gonna say Green Hill Zone.
Okay.
Speed shoes or invincibility? Which power up?
Invincibility.
All right. I want to say speed shoe because I'm always rushing through those levels. I want to be done with them. Which Sonic game has the best soundtrack? I think we can both
Sonic
repeat.
Mania.
Sonic Mania.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. No contest. This is pretty much self-explanatory. Classic Sonic or Modern Sonic?
Classic for me.
Modern for me. Okay. Favorite boss battle in any Sonic game?
Oof. Oh, man. I remember kind of rage quitting a couple times, but I think the one with Metal Sonic is very memorable.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way you chasing me. For me, I want to say Sonic versus Shadow on Sonic Adventure 2, right before the actual final boss. Especially because on that game you have to. So there's two versions of the story. You first clear the Sonic story and then the Shadow story, and then the story changes whether you are, and then you end up in the same ending, but you end up being one character and then you be the other character.
Oh, that's cool.
So I feel like that concept is like really, really good.
Yeah.
Because you can see like both like results basically.
I feel like we should also mention the Frontiers boss battles though.
Oh, 100%.
Because those were epics. But when you turn to Supersonic and you're flying around,
yeah,
those were insane.
And like the moveset too, and like all you had, yeah, like I said, the whole setting, the music really,
yeah.
And actually,
they're really good.
They were really good. Are they better? They might, just because of, I don't know. It's because we haven't had those kind of boss battles in so long.
I just remember us both being like, what is happening right now? Like I think it was more than we expected, and they were really awesome.
The one I just remember it had to be that. The one I remember the most, I think it was the second or third one. The one that is like skating and he cuts him in half.
Yeah.
When he grabbed like the sword, I guess with like telekinetic powers, which that's new for him.
Right.
I remember both being like our mouths went to the floor.
Yeah.
It was crazy. All right, last one. Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles? Which one is your sidekick?
Well, Sonic's not a sidekick.
Well, that's true. All right, well, Tails, Knuckles, or Shadow then?
I would say I'm torn between Tails and Knuckles because Knuckles was so badass when I was a kid. I want to say Knuckles, but honestly, I feel like because my nostalgia for Tails with the second game and that being the first game that I played, I'm going to say Tails.
I'm going to say Tails because I know if I'm about to fall, Tails can carry me.
Right, with a little
exactly.
helicopter.
I don't think Knuckles will be able to do that because he only glides down.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much. This was fun. Ladies and gentlemen, this was our first Game and Chat episode with a guest, and none other than Sebastian, aka SoundsBySébas, aka my husband. Thank you again for being here. Where can people find you?
Oh man, So you can find me on Instagram at SoundsBySébas. That's pretty much where I live, and I also do have a YouTube channel. Again, just SoundsBySébas. I do lo-fi hip hop on there, and I'm actually working on a new. I'll call it Supersonic 2 for now, but I am going to start working on another album that's inspired by Sonic the Hedgehog as well, so this is very fitting. So more to come on that. But yeah, find me on Instagram and YouTube under SoundsBySébas.
And honestly speaking, guys, hopefully you guys will get the opportunity one day to listen to this Supersonic album that we were talking about, because if Sonic ever gets a game, I think this soundtrack, and I'm not being biased here, this is actually something mind-blowing that he pulled off, and I'm very proud of him for doing that. So hopefully you get the chance to listen to it one day, but stay tuned for upcoming projects, of course, from SoundsBySébas and yours truly. Once again, guys, thank you so much. I hope you guys had a nice listening. We talked about Sonic the Hedgehog and his legacy in the gaming industry, and of course, we cannot wait to share with you what the next episode will be. I guess you're gonna have to find out, but in the meantime, if you need to catch up with previous ones, please be sure to check out your favorite podcast platforms. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Deezer, Amazon Music, etc., etc., etc. Just pick up your favorite, but make sure to subscribe, follow, and support the cause like you always do. Once again, everybody, thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. This is Daniel and Sebastian, aka 12 Switcheroo, signing off. Game on.